Right. Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. Over the years, and now that I'm at Cornell Tech in the information science and amidst all these computer scientists, I've sort of gotten, accustomed to whatever it is that it takes to try and communicate with computer scientists, and it's such a pleasure to be back amidst humanists and media studies scholars, though I hope I remain legible to you nevertheless. So this is a passion that's been ongoing for many years, and it continues to be lively, and it has become even more important to me as I understand that data obfuscation is really one of the last tools that we as individuals can exercise, and I don't think that that's sufficient. I only think of it as an interim tool for us to use. I also must acknowledge the people who have worked together with me on many of these projects, and without whom I would not be able to have done anything. So if you're walking out in a minute, here's the overview of this talk. And you can just read it. I'm not going to take too much time, but this is where I hope to get, and I'm going to rush through slides. That's one of the things that I learned from computer scientists. They always have 120 slides that they have to get through in 12 minutes. And this is not going to be that bad, but I do have a lot of slides. So it all started with TrackMeNot, and I was working on a project with a large group of computer scientists. It was a privacy project, and I was, the token philosopher or ethicist. And it had come to our attention because the DOJ in the United States was requesting search queries from the search engines, and I don't know what, it just suddenly hit me. What? They keep all our search queries? And I asked my computer science colleagues, is there anything we can do about it? And they said, what are you talking about? In order to perform the search, of course, your search queries have to go to the servers, and, well, they've got your search queries. And it still didn't feel like a normative answer to me. It just sounded descriptive. And so I was thinking, what can we do? What can we do? And we came up, and when I say we, Daniel Howe, who was a PhD student in computer science, who some of you may know his on artistic endeavors, created TrackMeNot, which sent fake queries to, it was a browser add-on sending fake queries to all the search engines at the time. Of course, the numbers have shrunk incredibly, but we've now extended TrackMeNot to send fake queries to any search bar. So if you're concerned about Amazon, for example, you can install TrackMeNot in Amazon as well. Here is what the fake queries, look like. And we have it working on Baidu, and we now have it translated to various languages. Daniel and I have moved on to ad nauseam. We now have, Vincent Tubiano, who was a postdoc at NYU with us, now works for the French equivalent of the Federal Communication Commission, and he single-handedly maintains TrackMeNot, continues to update it, all of it on the side and on a volunteer basis. And we still have quite a lot of use. We have in the tens of thousands of users who are, maybe even more than that, but of course we don't keep track. So obfuscation, but this experience and some of the feedback really made me realize that obfuscation wasn't this specific thing, but rather it was something general. And this was very exciting as we try to understand what is the nature of obfuscation and why does it respond to certain kinds of problems but not to others. So we did a little thinking about it, and here is how you might consider achieving privacy through crypto, which is, in many instances, achieving it by hiding the message, by hiding the data that you don't want people to see. So this was cryptogram. It also was a pretty neat extension. It was supposed to be used with Facebook, for example, where you could actually encrypt images so that Facebook itself could not see your images. And oh my goodness, if only it had caught on, because we wouldn't have the whole facial recognition debacle that we have today. But this is not how obfuscation works. Obfuscation does not work by hiding. Rather, it works by introducing noise. The definition that we offered in the book, and when I say we, it was now with Finn Brunton, who also was a postdoc at NYU at the time, and now, as many of you know, he's an amazing colleague in NYU's Media, Culture, and Communication department. We define our version of the term obfuscation, the production, inclusion, addition, or communication of misleading, ambiguous, or false data in an effort to evade, distract, or confuse data gatherers or diminish the reliability and value of data aggregation. And Finn, who is a historian, a cultural historian of science and engineering, had amassed a tremendous number of cases in which obfuscation has been used and is being used to kind of reveal the natural strategy or tactic that obfuscation is. He had found this historic case during World War II of the Allies using radar chaff, and we located this photograph. Allied planes would be flying towards their target. The German anti-aircraft radar would be seeing the phosphodot, which was the planes, and all of a sudden their screens would be filled with phosphodots, confusing them as to which was the plane. What it was letting go of just thousands of these little pieces of paper that were cut just to the right size to interfere with the radar wavelength at the time. And in fact, very recently when I gave a talk, someone came up to me and said he had heard this story also from the German side, from someone who was actually working with the radar together with the anti-aircraft. And indeed, they understood that the Allied forces had needed also to understand exactly what size to cut that radar chaff in order to perform this obfuscation. So it wasn't sort of easy to do. You needed some intelligence of the system you were trying to obfuscate. And this point is quite important. Here are some other efforts of obfuscation in popular media. Here is an orb-weaving spider that creates weaves from the prey that it catches sort of images of itself. So if a wasp or some other predator is flying by, at least it gives itself this extra chance of not being its prey. And here I was very proud, you probably can't see it, but this is a very common spider. You may even have one in your backyard, as I've found, and my family found it amusing that I protected the spider for the entire season that it lived among our pots. The Craigslist robber, I'm going to just race through. Here is Heather Dewey Hagborg's fabulous project to use DNA spray to obfuscate your presence. Benjamin Grosser, Go Rando, which randomizes your emotional responses to various Facebook posts. So that's, generally about obfuscation. And Daniel and I had been interested in doing more of this, and we created Ad Nauseam because we were, as many people are, concerned about advertising. And I should say right up front, I don't like advertising, but what I really find just so sad is that in order to advertise for like a little bit of delta better performance, and actually there's some question about this, in order to target advertising, we need to create this entire apparatus of surveillance on the internet. And fortunately, this issue has made its way front and center, and a lot of negative notice, but nevertheless it carries on. Here, some of you are familiar with this image of the myriad of people, parties, businesses that are involved. So we came up with Ad Nauseam, and as you can see, Mushan Zeraviv is a designer that worked with us, Daniel, myself, and then various other people. And there it is. All of these systems are downloadable. They're on GitHub. They're open. Please join us. Now, let me see if I can get this to work. You can also watch it online.
Keep sabotaging the constitution of the Do Not Track standard and ad networks.
Can you hear?
Our profiles behind our backs. We are left with no choice but to fight back. From the studios that brought you TrackMeNot, the browser extension that keeps searching to obfuscate your search queries, comes yet another data obfuscation plugin, Ad Nauseam, clicking ads so you don't have to. The Ad Nauseam plugin works in concert with your favorite ad blocker. Every ad blocked is then silently clicked by Ad Nauseam, confusing your data trackers by virtually liking all ads. Within your browser, the Ad Nauseam add-on collects and visualizes your clickstream over time, giving you a small glimpse of the data you passively generate. Ad Nauseam works in the background and does not interfere with your browsing. Point your browser at this URL and install Ad Nauseam now. Spread the word and help us code as we work to make Ad Nauseam better and to bring it to more people in more browsers. Finally, to the ad industry, we would like to say it is time to be respectful of our privacy expectations. Let's work together towards an honest and meaningful Do Not Track standard. Until that day comes, be sure we will keep pushing your buttons. All of them.
Thank you. So in recognition of the idea that of course, this is built on top of uBlock, which is an open source ad blocker. We didn't want to focus only on the blocking of the ads, but we really wanted to highlight the surveillance and the creation of profiles. And so we offer people options. One of them is to continue to see the ads, or you can, of course, opt not to see the ads. We also help block malware and some of the trackers that perform dubious activities on your browser. The other thing that you might have seen in the video was the creation of AdVault. What it does is all the ads that appear that maybe you don't see, we place into an AdVault, which it's kind of interesting when you visit AdVault. You can get a sense of how the industry sees you. I don't know why I get so many shoe ads, but that's what I see. So, there's obviously ways in which if you look at this AdVault, it gives you some intelligence into how your profile is perceived out there. We have it on GitHub. We love people to troubleshoot, give us suggestions, and so on. These are our usage numbers at the moment. We have some feedback. A lot of it is very positive. And some of it is quite negative. which here is a fork of, I think it's Firefox, and basically saying, no, we don't like ad nauseum, and we're not allowing people who use our browser to install it. So that's Track Me Not and ad nauseum. As you can see, ad nauseum was much more controversial. It is much more aggressive, and let's see what happens to it. So along the way in presenting these ideas to people and the two little systems, we receive a lot of criticism and skepticism, and I want to go through some of this with you because I want to make a persuasive case in favor of these little systems and obfuscation generally. So the question of does it work, it's very interesting because sometimes the criticism comes from people that are not as concerned about privacy, and they say things like, well, you've got to give up your privacy to get all the benefits, or you have to trade off privacy for security. They simply do not understand what privacy is and why it's important in my view. But often I'm getting criticism, let's call it friendly fire, from those very computer scientists who think that the solution is crypto, it's hiding. They think that obfuscation in the way we've used it, they're angry with us. They're saying because you give people a false sense of security and it doesn't work. So I want to just talk briefly about the does it work question and then really spend a little bit more time on the question of is it ethical. So here was the situation with Track Me Not. We were upset about the search engines maintaining our search terms and also then profiling us and manipulating the kinds of responses we get and using our search interests to decide other things about us. And so we go to the search engines and we say, hey, we don't like it, won't you do something about it? Okay, deafening silence. Then we go to our lawmakers and we say, oh, won't you regulate privacy? Nobody is picking up the phone. Now, what do you think is the one way you can get a response from a search engine? Yeah, submit a search query. That's the only way that you can get it to respond, and that was therefore the vector of insertion, if you will. And that's how we'd come up with Track Me Not. And we were really inspired by this comment that Gary Marks made, very early surveillance scholar. Within large-scale systems, there are almost always blind spots that are inherent in these systems. And that's what I begin to see as the strength of these obfuscating tactics. During the elections that Macron won, his team used obfuscation to create honeypots for hackers, and they were able to avoid some of the embarrassments, if you will, that affected our elections. So when people say, does obfuscation work? My response is, obfuscation is contingent. It's dependent on the environment. It's very particularized to the particular problem. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And the answer is it depends. It depends on what your goals are. What are the goals? The pilots flying over to drop bombs in the Second World War, they just needed a few minutes. If they needed hours, that form of obfuscation would not have worked. You can create deniability if you want to mess with your profile, if you want to resist certain kinds of profiling and pigeonholing, obfuscation may work for you, but it has to be of the right type. And so, for example, we're constantly working with changes to, say, Firefox in order to make sure that, to defend against what's known as side channel attacks, so that automated search queries aren't immediately identified as coming from TrackMeNot and not the user. And sometimes we obfuscate, even though we know the obfuscating terms or whatever the noise is can be filtered, but we do it to protest because there's no other way of protesting. Finally, it's dependent on the adversary. And again, in computer science, they're saying, like, this is an infinitely powerful adversary, infinitely evil. We say no, it could be the NSA, it could be Google or Facebook, or it could be a nosy neighbor. And in all of those cases, the obfuscation needs to match it. And there are some sorts of problems that obfuscation isn't a solution to. If you want privacy with your physician, you shouldn't obfuscate. If you want to be cured of whatever your disease is. But society needs other ways. We need to introduce confidentiality into the doctor-patient relationship. But for search queries, yes. And part of, oh, sorry. I'm not sure what's going on. Oh, no. Sorry. Part of what we need in a science of obfuscation is to add the parameters to accept the complexity and figure out how to create obfuscating, an understanding of obfuscation to create systems that match the problem. On the question of is it ethical, we have a lot of critiques. Sometimes we would say that, first of all, we would say the ends have to be ethical, they have to be legitimate, and that excludes certain uses of obfuscation. But we also need to assure ourselves that if obfuscation does damage systems in certain ways, that there aren't other, perhaps gentler means of achieving the same ends. And in the case of advertising or of TrackMeNot, we had seen how the do not track effort went over the past several years, where the industries would come together to establish some kind of do not track standard. And any time that they reached a solution that wasn't exactly to their liking, they could just stand up and walk away. And so obfuscation hands an extra tool for those who want to say, we're not helpless, we don't have to reach an agreement, we've got chips on our side. So where this leaves us is that we're, in many of these cases, we're in this kind of gloves off, arms race survival of the fittest. And I wanted to understand this better. With Ad Nauseam, as I said, was more controversial. And after we'd been running for almost a year, we got this email from Google letting us know that we were banned from the Chrome store. So Ad Nauseam and TrackMeNot work in Chrome and Firefox, but we were banned. And the reason is that your extensions functionality blocks malware, which is a distinct, which didn't make any sense at all. You know, we provide security to you, and that's counted as a second function, and that violates the terms. So feeling, really angry and hurt and so on, we did some studying of what other extensions had been banned. So because this was us, we had some support, but we noticed a bunch of other extensions that had been banned. Disconnect, which was also a privacy protecting extension. Here's an Amazon-like app store. Gab, which had become very popular with the alt-right talking their terrible talk. This was some form of spyware. A lot of, here's a fake ID apps. and then a lot of cryptocurrency mining extensions that you would install for some reason or another, and then they would utilize your computer to mine without you knowing, to mine cryptocurrency. So when we looked at all of those, and of course we were included among the banned extension, we classified them into three. First of all, there were those that did bad things, and Chrome was protecting us. There were others that mediated bad things. So maybe Gab, which created the possibility for evil planning and discussions. And then there were those where we put ourselves, which simply challenge the platform's interest. And that's what I mean by gloves off, interests versus interests. And this, by the way, just as an aside, is why I'm concerned about discounting the notion of ethics, because what I think ethics achieves for you is to get yourself out of the talk of this interest conflicts with that interest, but admit or strive for recognizing some interests as potentially having greater legitimacy than others, and not just like, let's duke it out, my interests, your interests. By the way, lots of hypocrisy about the mediation of bad things, as we know from history. We all know all this, and so forth. But where does this leave ad nauseum? So we appealed this, and we got back pretty much the identical comment. And then finally, we heard from a human being who said that specifically the item appears to simulate user behaviors by sending order in such a way that may result in financial harm to third-party systems such as advertising networks. So it's like, oh, you're harming the advertising networks. And who are these advertising networks? Well, this website shows that among the 37% of the websites that they were looking at, 96 of them used Google ad networks. And so this was just like this flat out, you are harming our interests, we are going to ban you. I think I'm pretty much running out of time. But let me just say that what's happened thus far is that if you use Chrome and you have a PC, there's a workaround the ban. If you use Chrome and you use a Mac, sorry, you cannot use ad nauseum. Anyway, you should be using Firefox. If you use Firefox, you can use ad nauseum, you can use Track Me Not. So we're currently in a battle for the moral high ground, and I think we're winning. But the important thought that I want to leave you with is a little bit beyond this notion of violating our privacy and surveillance and so on. Because one of the foundations of what we're seeing today with AI, and I think that profiling, targeted advertising, and automated decision-making are manifestations of this, which is to strive for efficiency. So companies, and I'm going to use Google and Facebook, what they're able to do should I finish my sentence? Oh, okay. Is automate the interaction. What we need to do is control human behavior through the system to automate those relationships and then expand them to scale. And that's really the basis of the relationships that we have And we heard a lot about it yesterday. Okay, I never thought I would quote Martin Heidegger. What obfuscation does is it interferes with the process of making human beings machine readable. We're saying, no, you have to deal with us on our terms and not on the terms that you've created. And this really, it's the patterns of discrimination. It's exactly that, to understand the patterns that we are and plug us into a system whereby we can be interacted with efficiently, cheaply, and at scale. And obfuscation is a threat to that. However, sadly, time to get real. I don't know that we're going to win this battle by ourselves, but I do believe that if lots of people start creating obfuscating tools, it will be a force to be reckoned with. And so I encourage us all to join this particular activity and be creative and build systems, and everybody, these are free, install them and join us in this effort. Thank you.